What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs Series. I was going through several scrapbooks of mine the other day, about 4 or 5 of them, and I came across several articles that I completely forgot about. And I was amazed of how many fights the men in this era would have in 1 year. I was so amazed that I wanted to discuss that with you the next time I did a video. So I said I'll bring out a couple of more scrapbooks and I'll go through them and discuss them with the members of my channel. And as I was going through the scrapbooks, I realized September 5th, 1930, that welterweight Tommy Freeman would knock out young Jack Thompson in 15 rounds. That bout took place in Cleveland, Ohio. And the articles in that scrapbook would really open my eyes. The Cleveland, Ohio newspapers. I would learn between May 18th, 1926 and February 13th, 1928, young Jack Thompson would face young Corbett III 5 times. The record was 3 losses, 1 draw, and 1 win. I would also discover between July 23rd, 1931 and October 23rd, 1931, young Jack Thompson would also face and lose twice to Lou Bullard, which was no disgrace because Lou Bullard was a 2-time world champion. But as I read further, I would discover that January 10th, 1930 and April 14th, 1931, Thompson would face Tommy Freeman 3 times. He would lose twice and win 1. But these men would have a fantastic series. Between October 1st, 1928 and May 9th, 1930, Thompson would also face Jackie Fields, total of 3 times, 2 losses and 1 win. But he would also face the babyface assassin Jimmy McLaurin, March 28th, 1930. And he would have 1 loss with Jimmy McLaurin. But Jimmy McLaurin knew who young Jack Thompson was. Now, Tommy Freeman, who was he? His name was Thomas Jewel Freeman. He was born January 22nd, 1904, Hot Springs, Arkansas. He would die February 20th, 1986. He was 82 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting Tommy Freeman. He was up in age during those years, but the conversations that I had with him was absolutely amazing. He was 5'7.5". He was a welterweight champion. He had a record of 213 total bouts, 173 wins, 83 by knockout, 20 losses, and 20 draws. But Tommy Freeman would discuss with me bouts that he had with Pinky Mitchell. Pinky Mitchell was the first 140 junior welterweight champion in boxing history. The division began in 1922. He also discussed with me the bout between him and Jack Zivik. Jack Zivik was a 1928 Olympic gold medalist. Jack Zivik would have 4 other brothers, Pete Zivik. But the most famous Zivik brother was Fritzy. Fritzy Zivik would defeat Henry Armstrong, October 4th, 1940, New York's Madison Square Garden. And that same night, Henry Armstrong would be saluted by Ray Robinson. Ray Robinson would have his professional debut against Joe Escoveria. But Tommy Freeman would also talk about the bout between him and George Lavin. September 11th, 1930, Jim McLaurin had knocked out lightweight champion Al Singer in 3 rounds. The bout took place at New York's Yankee Stadium. It was an untitled bout. And as I continued to read, I would discover that 2-time world welterweight champion, Boxing Hall of Famer, Jim McLaurin, who was known as the babyface assassin, would defeat Al Singer. He would also take on Ruby Goldstein. He would defeat him. Sammy Mandel, Sid Terrace, Billy Patrol, the Fargo Express. He would have 3 fights with him, 2 wins and 1 loss. He would also be in the ring with Fidel LaBarber, who would be an Olympic champion in the flyweight division himself. He would defeat him twice and lose to him 1 time. They would reverse that decision to a draw. He would also be in the ring with Benny Leonard in 1932. He would defeat him. And the Lower East Side would close up shop. Kids didn't go to school. The Lower East Side was somewhat of a Jewish community. And it was somber every time Benny Leonard would have a disappointment. But Jimmy McLaughlin would also be in the ring with Ray Miller. He would win one and lose one to him. Lewis Kid Kaplan, who he would defeat. Lou Ambers, who he would defeat. Charles Bud Taylor, he would lose twice and win one. Tony Canzoneri, who he would defeat. He would have a 3-fight series with Barney Ross. May 28, 1934. May 28, 1935. September 1934. Oh, what a series that was. Young Corbett III. He was a southpaw. Jim McLaughlin would defeat him for the welterweight championship belt. He would knock him out in one round, 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Al Singer would defeat Eddie Cannonball Martin, Pete Nebo, Charles Bud Taylor, Andre Ratis, and Sammy Mendel. He would have a record of 73 total bouts, 9 losses and 64 knockouts. And what was amazing about Al Singer, he would knock out Sammy Mendel July 17, 1930, in one round. But 6 months later, November 14, 1930, he'd be knocked out himself in one round by Tony Canzoneri, and he would lose his world lightweight championship belt. October 4th, world bantamweight champion Al Brown defeats Eugene Hart in 15 rounds, Paris, France. He would remain bantamweight champion of the world. Now, Eugene Hart, who was he? He was born February 8th, 1907, and he would die in 1980. He was 72 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Paris, France. Now, he was in the ring with fighters such as Peter Kane and Kid Francis, Emil Plandler, Billy Patrol, Speedy DeGrassi, and Pete Nebo. What a fighter he was. Now, Billy Patrol was 25 years old. He stood 5 foot 7 inches. He was a junior welterweight champion. He had a record of 106 wins, 19 losses, 14 draws, 57 knockouts. Now, Jackie Kid Bird was 21 years old. He stood 5 foot 9 inches. He had a record of 84 total bouts, 4 losses, 5 draws, and 31 knockouts. 1926, Lewis Kid Kaplan would take on Sid Terrace, Ray Miller, Spud Myers, Tony Canzoneri, King Tut, Bruce Flowers, Tommy Grockman, Jackie Kid Bird, just to name a few. Now, Billy Patrol, his name was the Fargo Express. His name was William Michael Patrol. He stood 5 foot 7 inches and had a 70-inch reach. He was born January 10th, 1905 in Burswick, Pennsylvania. He died May 14th, 1983 in Minnesota. He had 89 wins and 21 losses. He'd be in the ring with Ray Miller, Jim McLaughlin, Battling Battalino, Barney Ross, Billy Townsend, and Joe Rivers. October 10th, 1930, Jackie Kid Bird would defeat Billy Patrol, the Fargo Express, in 10 rounds. Fought him in New York's Madison Square Garden, and he would retain his junior welterweight championship crown. Now, as I opened up another book, I would discover that Billy Patrol was a better fighter than I give him credit for. Jackie Kid Bird would win the New York SAC, NBA, IBU, Canadian World Bantamweight Championship. Would defeat Benny Schwartz, Frankie Ash, Kid Francis, Elmer Spider Plander, Eugene Greek, Teddy Bullock, and Pete Santiago. Alfonso Theolofino Brown. His name was Panama Al Brown. He was born July 5th, 1902 in Panama. He died April 1st, 1951. New York's Madison Square Garden would be the last appearance he would make. He would wave his hand to the crowd as though he was saying goodbye, and he would die of tuberculosis. He stood 5'11", weighed 112 to 129 pounds. It was a bantamweight, and he would eventually blossom to a featherweight. Friday, November 21st, 1930, Fargo Express Billy Patrol would drop babyface assassin Jimmy McLaurin, and twice the very first round would be one of the most exciting rounds in all of boxing. And he became ranked for the welterweight status. McLaurin hurt hand in the second round of a very heated boxing exchange. It was a welterweight bout that took place in New York's Madison Square Garden. The referee was Pasty Hanley, and he oversees the action. 23-year-old colored world middleweight champion, Harlem Thunderbolt, Harry Smith. Draws 10 rounds with Toddy Lippmann. Toddy Lippmann was a light heavyweight. Now, Jim McLaurin was 22 years old. He stood 5'6". He was a welterweight. Had a 67-inch reach. He had a record of 47 wins, 6 losses, 3 draws, and 18 knockouts. Now, Billy Batroy was 25 years old. He stood 5'7". He was a lightweight with a 70-inch reach. He had a record of 107 wins, 20 losses, 14 draws, and 57 knockouts. Now, I talked to you about Harry Smith. His name was the Harlem Thunderbolt. He was a colored middleweight champion. He would win that title by defeating Jack McVeigh, the Pride of Harlem, 1929, the Harlem's Athletic Club. He would win the Metropolitan Amateur Championships, the Canadian Amateur Middleweight Championships, the Inner City Middleweight Championships. Had a record of 60-0 with 55 knockouts as an amateur. Was born October 28, 1907 in Kingston, Jamaica. He died September 19, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois. But he would reside in Harlem, New York. That's where he would spend most of his boxing years. His manager was Dave Brown. Fought from 1928 to 1932 as a professional. He had a record of 62 total bouts, 51 wins, 7 losses, 37 knockouts, and he was stopped once. Those losses came because he was ill, and he continued to fight. Otherwise, I believe he would have been undefeated. He was one of the most devastating middleweight punchers in boxing history. His dad wanted him to become a dentist because his dad owned a taxi and limousine company. He had a car company, and he owned tons of real estate throughout Manhattan. Saturday, November 16, 1929, Olympic Boxing Club. Harry Smith would take on Jack McVeigh. Jack McVeigh was 24 years old. He stood 5'9". He had a record of 80 wins, 26 losses, 5 draws, and 25 knockouts. Harry Smith was 22 years old. He stood 6'1", had a record of 21 wins, 1 loss, and 15 knockouts. And my God, what a fight that was. I met many who knew about that fight and told me what big of a deal that was. Because before Ray Robinson would be beloved by Harlem, it was Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. He was a middleweight. He could punch. And he was a hell of a fighter. One competition, Jack Dempsey was the referee. And after Harry Smith would knock his opponent out, Jack Dempsey would go over to the ringside and tell one of the commissions there, this N-word, should he turn welterweight or middleweight as a professional, he will become champion because he hits like a Mills kick. That was Jack Dempsey. Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt. Oh, what a fighter he was. He's my favorite middleweight champion of all times. Now, in that community, you had some of the greatest black fighters of all times. And they all went through Harlem, New York. Either the train or the fight in Madison Square Garden. They would all stay at a hotel that was very popular. It was called the Teresa Hotel, located on 125th Street in Harlem. Fighters such as Jack Johnson, Black Prince Peter Jackson, Al Gaynor. You had a fighter by the name of Canada Lee, Young Peter Jackson, Black Bill. He was Eladio Valdez. Black Pearl, Harry Woodson, Andy Bowen, Jack Blackburn, Dave Holly, Cleve Hawkins, Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, Joe Jeanette, Sam McVeigh, Old Master Joe Gans, Black Zivic. You had Barbados Demon Joe Walcott, Ruff Turner, Sam Langford, Harry Wills, Larry Temple, Big Bill Tate, Al Walker, Walcott Langford, and Larry Gans, Alabama Kid, and Panama Joe Gans, George Godfrey, William Gorilla Jones, Leo Johnson, and Eddie Patterson, Jimmy Bivens, Holman Williams, Coco Kid, fighters like Oscar Rankins and Jack Chase, Lloyd Marshall, and Jack McVeigh, Eddie Booker, Burt Littell, Charlie Burley, and Henry Armstrong. Of course, Joe Louis. We would also have the Georgia Deacon, Theodore Tiger Flowers, Bruce Flowers, many, many others would all pass through Harlem, and they would visit some of the greatest clubs in Harlem. Some of the clubs like the Savoy Manor, located on 141st Street. And the Savoy Manor would have a drummer. He was 28 years old. And he could play those drums. He had a hunchback. And he had a wonderful singer named Ella Fitzgerald. The drummer's name was Chick Webb. And you would have the famous dancers doing the Lindy Hop and Jitterbug. And you would have performers in there, such as Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong. Later on in years, you would have Coleman Hawkins and Charlie Parker and many others. But that was the place to be. But Harry Smith, who passed away in 1933, was some fighter. He becomes the world colored middleweight champion by defeating Jack McVeigh, known as the Pride of Harlem, November 16, 1929, at the Olympia Boxing Club in New York. Julius Williams was his name. Jack McVeigh. He was born July 14, 1905, in Atkins, Georgia. He died in 1975. He stood 5'9". He was a welterweight and middleweight. And he stopped Powell Silvers in 5 rounds at the Broadway Arena in Brooklyn, New York. January 7th, 1930, after a left-right combination to the jaw and spleen. And Silvers, the caused the referee, Jack Dorman, to step in, giving him no other choice but to stop the contest. Now, Larry Estridge beat Panama Joe Gans in a unanimous decision, June 26, 1924, in New York's Yankee Stadium. Harry Smith never participated in the tournament. That was left over by Mickey Walker. That tournament was left over because of a belt that was relinquished by Mickey Walker. Mickey Walker didn't give an opportunity to Harry Smith. Didn't give it to Jack McVeigh. He didn't give it to William Landon Jones, Gorilla Jones. He didn't give it to Len Johnson. So the fight went up for the grabs. And William Landon Jones would wind up defeating Hondo Piazza for that title. And he would become the second black middleweight champion in boxing history. Now, Ray Robinson will be the next world middleweight champion. He would stop Jake LaMotta, the Raging Bull, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, February 14th, 1951, in Chicago Stadium. And you would have fighters such as Randy Turpin, Emil Griffith, Oakland Billy Smith, Georgie Benton, Alan Faulkner, Charlie Green, Watson Jones, Kid Gavilan, Bob Satterfield, Sammy Baruti, Gil Turner, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum, Simba Colombe, James Lights Out Tony, Gerald McLennan, Roy Jones Jr. Oh, what names you would have as middleweights. Now in the welterweight divisions, you would have names such as Shane Mosley and Vernon Forrest, Floyd Mayweather. Lightweight, you would have Bo Jack and Ike Williams, Bob Montgomery, Jackie Wilson, Sandy Sadler as a featherweight, Ezra Charles and Archie Moore, Muhammad Ali, Sonny Liston, Floyd Patterson, Smoking Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, Big Daddy Riddick Bowe, Mark Breland, Frank Bruno, Iron Mike Tyson, Lennox the Lion Lewis, Pernod Sweet Pea Whitaker, Meldrick T&T Taylor, Terrible Terry Norris and Tyrell Biggs, Andre Ward, Terrence Crawford, Earl Spence, Tank Davis, Devin Haney, Kevin the Flushing Flash Kelly, Poison Jr. Jones, Jeff Chandler, Matthew Saad Muhammad, Michael the Jinx Spinks. You even have fighters such as Muhammad Kawi, Rocky Lockridge, Roger Black Mamba Mayweather, Larry the Eastern Assassin Holmes. My God. As I go through those scrapbooks for the first time in probably 5 years, it made me realize how rich history boxing would have. And it made me appreciate it even more. Because some of the best athletes are fighters. They reveal their heart. They reveal their mental aptitude. You can discover who a fighter is when he's put through everything that needs to be put through. And through that, you'll find out the man he is. Can he hit and hit back? Can he function when he's no longer focused on task at hand? When he's concussed? Does he throw punches back when he's pinned against the ropes? All that will be answered in that ring. So as I go through the scrapbooks and I see articles like I just described, and so it keeps my heart in the game. It's a great sport. Yes, it has its disappointments, but what does not? Now, May 22nd, 1931, featherweight champion Bat Ballino would defeat former Olympian flyweight champion Fidel LaBarber, New York's Madison Square Garden. He would defeat him in 15 rounds. Bat Ballino stood 5'5.5". He had 65-inch reach. He was a featherweight. He was born February 18, 1908, in Hartford, Connecticut. He died July 25, 1977. He was 69 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Hartford, Connecticut. Fidel LaBarber stood 5'3". He had a 66-inch reach. He was a flyweight. He was born September 29, 1905 in New York. He died October 2nd, 1981. He was 76 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Los Angeles, California. I met Fidel LaBarber. He was National Amateur Athletic Union Boston champion, 1924. He would participate in the Olympic Games. May 27th, 1931, Hall of Fame future welterweight two-time champion babyface assassin Jimmy McLaurin would defeat Fargo Express Billy Patrol, 10 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. Fought August 20th, 1931 in New York's Yankee Stadium as well. McLaurin was 23 years old. He stood 5'6". He was a welterweight and had a 67-inch reach. Now, the thing with Jimmy McLaurin, he had a record of 47 wins, 7 losses, 3 draws, and 16 knockouts. He weighed 145 pounds. Billy Patrol, the Fargo Express, was 26 years old. He stood 5'7". He was a lightweight with a 70-inch reach. He weighed 136 pounds. He had a record of 112 wins, 21 losses, 14 draws, and 59 knockouts. Between November 11th, 1929, and November 21st, 1930, Sammy Mandel, November 29th, 1929, he would defeat him. Ruby Goldstein, December 13th, 1929. Sammy Mandel, March 1st, 1930. Young Jack Thompson, March 28th, 1930. Billy Patrol, the Fargo Express, November 21st, 1930. Between November 21st, 1930 and April 10th, 1931, Jimmy McLaurin would take on fighters such as Jackie Moore, King Tut twice. What a fighter Jim McLaurin was. What a fighter with all the men that I just mentioned. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs Series. I hope I didn't talk you to your death. But this is my passion. As I close the books of the scrapbooks tonight, I just want to leave you with one thing. Boxing is probably the only truth teller that you would come across that will reveal your passion, reveal the truth about what's on your mind. Thanks for watching. Until next video, all great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Peace.